All right. Well, welcome back. And it is what, Monday, 30 March. March is almost out of here. This is video number 36. And we're going to get into this. I sometimes I fall down these fucking rabbit holes and I don't know where the fuck they're going to lead, but holy fucking shit. So, you remember how I was saying that I was hot supposition, okay, that yeah, there was the Atlanta child murders and there was Wayne Williams killing the kids, okay, but no one could ever figure out why the hell he killed the kids. Was he just crazy? Was he a mean son of a bitch? Was it a homosexual thing? Was it child pornography? What the hell was going on? No one ever came up. You'll never hear Slayton. Well, they did come up with a little bit of a BS story that maybe Wayne was killing the kids because he thought he could thin the herd, of the dumb black kids or something, I guess, and make him not, as a smart black person, not look so stupid, which I always thought was kind of the dumbest fucking thing. Okay. Um, and then I ventured off into the child porn, child snuff film thing, which I still hold to that. I still think that there's probably some of the killings had something to do with that, but I also think some of the killings were just to shut some of the kids up. Okay. But you see here, it says Tangled Web. We're going to get into this video. This is from 1991. Okay. And you remember how so slowly we have evolved into, you know, Wayne Williams, child killer, Wayne Williams, child pornographer, Wayne Williams involved with Michael Thieves, Wayne Williams involved with organized crime, the Gambinos, Wayne Williams involved with their attorneys, Ed Garland, Hirsch Friedman, all these mob attorneys, and they're involved in some kind of real estate money laundering scam to launder drug money. Okay? Now, if we know that the mob can do these things, okay, and does do these things to launder their money, Axum gone, Fryer gone, and they're getting these high priced attorneys to start these dummy, let me make sure I'm recording here, real estate scams so they can launder their money. If the government knows that they're doing that, okay, and if you think of the government as not just a single um, all aware entity, okay, so what I'm saying is that one aspect of the government may be aware of certain things, and another aspect of the government may not be aware of those things that are going on. You see what I'm saying? It's a tangled web. I would say, it's a multi-headed hydra. The government, okay, and so you could have on one hand one part of the government working to shut down all these real estate scams, money laundering scams, and you have another part of the government using the same tactics as organized crime and maybe even working with organized crime, okay, to fulfill its goals, to get around the law, to get around, say, laws preventing them from funding, say, the Contras or selling arms to the Iranians or whatever. So I started thinking about this and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm from Atlanta and I remember a long while, way, way, way back, okay, there was this bank. called BCCI, the Bank of Commerce or Credit and Commerce International. And it was a bank started by these Arab guys, okay? And it's supposed to, it's not a bank for you and me. It's a bank for rich people to finance and for countries to finance whatever they wanted to do. And very little regulation. And it's a merchant bank, okay? And what they found out is that intelligence services, arms dealers, drug dealers, criminals, organizations like the Gambinos, the mafia, were using BCCI with its international connections to hide their transactions and to cover up their money laundering and drug smuggling and all kinds of other things. And I remember this because I had a friend, okay, that I grew up with, and we ended up he ended up going to he went to Riverdale High School. I went to North Clayton, and we kind of lost touch there. And then we ended up going to the same college, okay, and West Georgia College. And he was specializing in business banking, okay. And matter of fact, that's what he's in to this day, okay. And he's very wealthy. And I remember when he graduated and went off to, send resumes around. Um, you start off locally and then you work your way around the country or whatever. Well, I remember talking to him once and I said, "So how's it going with the job thing? Uh, finding a job?" And he's like, "Yeah, you know, I got this interview with this company in Buckhead called BCCI, Bank of Credit and Commerce International." And it was more international banking. It was kind of a little bit out of my bailiwick, I guess. And they were really interested in me. But I found another bank that somebody I knew. I didn't know anybody at this bank, but this other bank, I don't know what bank he went with, you know, in Atlanta he went with, but he went for an interview at BCCI and he told me he was up in Buckhead, but I didn't keep track of where it was at, where the interview was at. Okay. So I'm like, oh, okay. So now that's how I remember BCCI. And then in 91, when all this breaks about BCCI and money laundering and supposedly the CIA and stuff, I see him again and he's like, oh, shit. So glad I didn't take that fucking job. Because, see, he graduated in 89 or so. And he interviewed with them in 89, that summer. So he would have been totally involved in all that happened. Okay. And somehow. And so I was like, hey, didn't you go interview with that bank that's in the news now? And he goes, oh, yeah, God, thank God I didn't get that damn job. And I'm like, yeah, wow, you would have been one of those guys they are hauling off in handcuffs there, wouldn't you? Oh, yeah, that would have been me. I'm so glad. Luck of the draw. And so, anyway, watch this. We're going to skip through a little bit of this. It's a long thing. It's like 2 hours. I'm not going to go through all 2 hours, but just listen to what they have to say and compare it to what I had to say about Ed Garland and this money laundering they were doing, starting these dummy corporations and real estate scams, and that I was just suppositioning on. And it's almost word for word what I was suppositioning on. And then look at the characters involved and how they pop up later. Okay? And you'll see what I mean here. So here we go.
Our main focus tonight is the extraordinary and seemingly limitless story of a worldwide banking scandal, a tale of fraud, corruption, and international intrigue. It involves the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or BCCI, which operated more than 400 branches in 73 countries. BCCI was founded in 1972 by Aga Hassan Abedi, a man who's been called the Rasputin of the Middle East. Abedi started his bank.
All right, now remember that name, Aga. So let me write that down. Aga Hassan Abedi. Okay. And just remember that name. And there was something else I was going to say, but anyway, I can't remember it now, but we'll get to it. All right, we'll keep going. All right, let's see if it'll play here. All right, hold on one second.
Oil sheikhs of the Persian Gulf area. Officially, BCCI was incorporated in Luxembourg and the Cayman Islands, two places known for their light regulation of the banking industry. But its main home of operations was London. There's an American connection as well. This year, BCCI acknowledged that without permission from U.S. regulators, it held an interest in three banks: the Independence Bank of Encino, California, the National Bank of Georgia in Atlanta, and First American Bank shares of Washington, D.C.
So the Atlanta branch became the main branch involved with the Contra affair, okay? And the financing, moving money. Like, so they would remember those, remember I told you about Northrop, okay? And how he was involved in the, with Garland and Wayne Williams' defense. He was the investigator. And then later he got involved with the Israelis and he was kind of the go between mercenary selling arms from the Israeli stocks of TOW missiles and Hawk missiles to the Iranians, you know, to stop the Iraqis and to bloody each other's noses, okay? And then we switched and started selling to the Iraqis too, you know, the enemy of my enemy. But Northrop was involved in that, okay? And another story, I don't know who this is. I don't know the name of the company, but I'm definitely going to find out now. I remember back in the late 90s, I used to listen to this guy, Art Bell. Mostly it's about UFOs, Bigfoot, stuff like that. And I get a big chuckle while I was driving around at night delivering pizza. But I remember this guy came on. And I remember I listened intently because he started talking about he had a toy business in Atlanta. And he specifically mentioned, okay, up in Marietta, like a corporate kind of a, you know, they got these, I'm not, they're not business buildings. They're like, you know, strip clubs for businesses. So they're kind of like little corporate parks, you know, they build all over Atlanta. And he started his business there like in the 70s or the early 80s. And he made this like mechanical toy or something. And across from him was this other business. And that guy came over one day and he noticed a lot of cars, government looking cars, coming up to that business all the time. And then one day the guy came over and started asking him about his business and what he did. And he told him. And then eventually the guy and him, you know, went out to lunch and they became friends. And then the guy wanted to buy a part into his business. He thought it was a good idea. And long story short, basically the guy bought into the business and then forced him out of his business and took over the business, this toy business, okay? And used the toy business as a front for selling arms, weapons to the Contras. I don't know how. Arms dealing, okay? I don't exactly know, how, but he was just going on and on about this. And I was intently listening because I used to live right across the street, okay, from this complex that he's talking about. I knew exactly where it was at. It's like, I think it was like Delk Road and Terrell Mill or something like that. I have to go look again, but I'm going to have to look this guy up again. But, and then what he told me was really fascinating. This is like 98, 99. He's telling this story. And he tells the story how when the Iran Contra thing came out, and then they did all these investigations. There was other investigations later on, like BCCI and stuff like that. And then he talked about Sonny Bono. You remember Sonny and Cher? Remember Sonny Bono was a singer. He was mayor of Las Vegas there, not Las Vegas, Palm Springs for a while, and then he became a congressman from the Palm Springs area. And Sonny Bono just happened to head this, or was in this committee that was looking into this BCCI Contra connection and all this kinds of stuff. And he had contacted this congressman, and they were investigating. They were taking his deposition. They were investigating it, and then I think was it 98? Sonny Bono was up at Lake Tahoe, and supposedly he was skiing down this slope that he had skied many times before in 20 years. And somehow he smashed into a tree and broke his neck. And he died, and that was the end of Sonny Bono. And then you saw Cher at his funeral, and, Chaz or whatever their daughter's name was at the funeral. And everybody was really upset because he was died. But guess what happened to the investigation into BCCI and the Contras and all that kind of stuff? It dropped because no one else was interested in it. Mostly Sonny Bono was interested in it. So the whole thing died when Sonny Bono died. And this guy was talking about how the autopsy said that his neck was broken in a peculiar way that didn't reflect him smashing into this tree. Okay. Which I thought was interesting. Interestingly, like a year later, a Kennedy, a one that was going to run for Congress, this might have been 98, 99, somewhere in there. I don't remember exactly. Died on the same slope, very close to where Sonny Bono died. He also, I think they were throwing a football back and forth while they were skiing, and he smashed into a tree and killed himself. Crazy, crazy. Anyway, let's listen to this real quick and we'll move on. All right, hold on one second.
A bank intended to help developing nations. It now appears that BCCI was rigged up as a giant rip-off scheme to line the pockets of insiders. According to reports by the accounting firm of Price Waterhouse, BCCI made over $2 billion worth of loans to a small inner circle of allies. Last week, Britain's Channel 4 television interviewed a former BCCI employee who talked about the loan scam. His identity was concealed to protect him.
One particular character who was related to a royal family in the Middle East, who I subsequently discovered after leaving in a newspaper, was actually a shareholder, had a loan there that was a non-performing loan. When I say it was non-performing, I mean specifically that the bank was receiving no money in return. Normally, one would expect to receive interest payment or repayment of capital every 3 or 6 months, or whatever the agreed repayment schedule was. Basically, there was no attempt to repay the capital. The credit committee would have various members appointed by the bank who would...
I just love that. Mob facts. So it's like facts about the mob. Okay. Now, what he's describing there is absolutely like textbook money laundering. Okay. So they either use real estate or they get a loan. Okay. And this is what, remember, Trump got in trouble. Okay. For all these things that these fraudulent loans. Remember, he tried to get the attorney general or the district attorney who prosecuted him in New York on exactly the same charges. Okay. That she took out a loan on a home and that there was some kind of fraudulent activity involved in that or something like that. But so what they'll do is, in order to launder the money, they'll take the money and invest it in the bank, and then the bank will loan them out the same money. Okay, so they'll have their money, their drug money, in an LLC or international corporations out of the Cayman Islands and under ABC Corporation. ABC Corporation will make an investment into that bank. Okay. And then the same people who own ABC Corporation will get a loan from that bank, basically getting their money from the bank, and they never have to repay it. Okay. Thus laundering their money. Or um, the bank will pay them out a little bit at a time over time, thus laundering the money. That's exactly what he's talking about. And so, what I'm saying in the Atlanta child murders is that the Atlanta child murders was a sideshow compared to what was really going on. And they shut down Wayne Williams, okay, because it would have exposed everything else. This is why do you think they didn't focus on the children? Because that would have led to the child pornography, the exploitation, the, the blackmail, okay? They were Wayne, I'm fairly certain that Wayne was using these children, okay, just like we see with the Epstein and these girls, underage girls, to blackmail politicians, okay, to get contracts for the mob, okay. So there's this tentacle. And, when they talk about the deep state, do you know where they got that term? There was a car wreck in Turkey, okay. And in the car wreck, these people died. And in the car wreck, they found a government minister, a head of the Turkish organized mob, and some kind of other banking official. And they were all right there in the car with each other, talking, conversing, scheming. Okay. And so the Turkish newspapers came up with this term deep state, which means that there's a state within the state, this hydra I'm talking about, that's the government, that uses the state, just like Epstein, okay? They blackmail politicians, they blackmail bank officials. The mob's involved, but the mob's not the total control, okay? There are other people, they use the mob when they have to, and when they want to get things that can't get done the other way. There's intelligence services involved. It's a fucking hydra, okay? And they all meet in the center of this wheel called the deep state. And off from that is drug dealing. Off from that is real estate scams. Off from that is banking scams. Off from that is blackmailing politicians. Off from that, blackmailing bank officials. Off from that, child pornography, drug smuggling. It's a spiral, okay? Intelligence, blackmailing operations, and gathering. It's all right there, and it all exists within the law and outside the law, okay? And when we see these things come up, they're usually a little portion, not the entire picture. They're just a little snapshot, like the Atlanta child murders was a little corner snapshot of the puzzle, just like BCI is a little corner snapshot of the puzzle, but it's not the entire puzzle. Okay. And I know it sounds like I'm weaving this grand conspiracy, and I used to would laugh at people that would say, QAnon type shit like that. But after reading so much and seeing so much, I'm really starting to side in that direction, that they're parts of the government that work against organized crime, and they're parts of the government that work with organized crime. Okay? Anyway, we'll keep going.
Who would decide on the basis of collateral or whatever whether a loan was worth doing. Having said that, it was very difficult to understand how any banker could have approved some of these loans.
To cover the missing funds.
And one side thing here. So there's a lot of people that talk about this, okay, but they like to put it into the terms of the Jewish Rothschild cabal, or you'll hear the term Khazarian mafia, okay, which is just anti-Semitic race baiting. Because what you find out with Jeffrey Epstein was Jewish, okay, and I think the guy he worked with is Jewish, but there were plenty of other people involved that they blackmailed and worked with Wexner, um, all these guys that weren't Jewish, okay. So it's not a Jewish banking whatever thing. A lot of people like to put it in that category. They're using all kinds of different. I mean, there's Masons involved, and then there's British bankers involved who don't have a drop of Jewish blood in them. Okay, the Jews didn't invent the banking system; they just, they're using it just like you drive a car. Um, if you drive a Mercedes and you're Jewish, and a Muslim guy or a Christian guy drives a Mercedes, it doesn't mean that the Jews control all Mercedes, okay? There's criminal conspiracies and gangs and killers and good people and bad people in all religions and all groups. So don't go down this ridiculous. And this is how they get you. Okay, this is how they get you. Because once you start saying it's the Jews, okay, no one's going to take you serious. It's a Rothschild, Khazarian mob, whatever. Then the next thing is people just start throwing everything you just said from there on out the window, and they ignore whatever facts you bring up. So don't get into that trap where people start saying that Jews didn't kill the Atlanta children. Okay, they weren't. There may be Jews that were part of the criminal organization, just like there were Greeks, just like there were Muslims, just like there were Christians. Okay, so don't be stupid and fall down that rabbit hole. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. All right, let's see if it'll start back.
Began seeking huge cash deposits and is said to have become the financial institution of choice for some of the world's most unsavory characters. Among the bank's reported customers, dictators looting their national treasuries, Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines, Panama's Manuel Noriega, Iraq's Saddam Hussein. Terrorists, too, were courted. Abu Nidal is said to have done business in the London branches of BCCI, using accounts there to fund attacks on Western targets. And arms dealers also became regular clients. During the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, for example, BCCI is said to have been the main conduit for funneling money and missiles to Afghan rebels. And there are allegations that BCCI was involved in the Iran-Contra scheme for arming the Nicaraguan rebels. It's also been reported that BCCI...
And see, now, when you hear Wayne in his interview say, oh, there was no conspiracy, there was no, to get me until after they stopped me past the bridge, okay? Because once they put my name into those FBI computers, Iran-Contra came back and all that, and my work with the CIA and all this kinds of bullshit, which I think all that's just, bullshit fantasy coming out of Wayne Williams' head. There's no way that the CIA was using Wayne Williams. If they did, if groups like that were using Wayne Williams, it wasn't to go work as an agent in Africa, in Angola. It was to acquire black children, to use them against targets, okay, that honeypots that they were trying to blackmail, just like Jeffrey Epstein was using these modeling agencies and stuff to bring in fresh meat, I guess you could say, to blackmail politicians, okay? And then selling off that information and that blackmail. Okay, we've got this guy, use this on him, and he's ours, okay? That's what I think. If there was any connection between intelligence groups or the FBI and Wayne Williams, it had to do with that kind of stuff, if that kind of stuff was going on. I definitely think now that some of the kids were being used in that aspect. I don't know how, I don't have any proof, but I definitely believe that was one of the things, okay? And that they were either going to, they found out or heard they were going to tell, or they threatened to tell, or you better let me go. I'm going to tell my mommy, I'm going to tell the police, all this shit. You know what I'm saying? Because I remember this story that, was it Patrick Baltazar? One of the children was found not dead, but in his clothing. They found at his house. Remember, after they found the body, they went to the house and they searched the clothing. And in the clothing that the child had worn and taken off and put in the dirty clothes, they found a key to a hotel room, and I believe it was the Omni International. Okay. And that room was the same room that Maynard Jackson had stayed with at a particular time. But I don't know if it's the same dates. So I find that interesting. But so when you're looking at the Atlanta child murders, you're looking at a lower level here, okay? At the lower end level. The service and exploitation level, okay? They're trying to blackmail people to get them to cooperate, or they are cooperating, so they're providing them with service. You know, it's punishment and rewards, okay? And you need someone on the lower end, you need a Jeffrey Epstein on a local level, like Wayne Williams, to go out and procure, children, if that's what the person's into. And especially with children, because, if he goes out and he gets some 18, 19-year-old teenage girl and he's having sex with the mayor or a council person. Remember those two council people that showed up and defended Wayne Williams? Okay? If you've got someone that's in control of contracts, and there were a lot of fucking contracts going on there at the end of the 90s, the end of the 70s and early 80s. Remember, they're building the airport, they were building MARTA, they were rebuilding all of the highways. Remember that? They were building downtown. That takes a lot of concrete. Where do you think concrete comes from? Okay. You got people, union wages. That's what Mayor Jackson wanted, was union wages and a guarantee that at least 30, 40, 50% of the contracts went to minority groups. Okay. So who's going to be controlling those unions? Most likely the mob. They're going to get their cut. Okay. And so if they can get a deal guaranteed with companies, they may not control all of the companies, but they can get a deal with a company that they have influence over. And how do they do that? Well, there's a bidding process, but council people and people who, city managers who make those decisions, and Fulton County supervisors that make those decisions can be influenced by blackmail. Okay? So that's on the lower end level, and that's where Wayne Williams is at. And then you've got the go-betweens, the lawyers like Garland and Hirsch, Friedman, and A.J. Block, and they're starting these dummy corporations, okay, to launder all this money. And then you've got the banks, and then you've got the higher-ups, the intelligence operatives, okay? You've got the mob on a corner level involved at a certain level, okay? That's why they call it the dark, excuse me, what do they call it now? The deep state, because it covers all these different aspects of our government, but not seen in the light, okay? All right, so here we go. I'm talking way too much. All right.
American drug lords who had billions of dollars of dirty money that needed laundering. It was this money laundering that brought BCCI to the attention of U.S. authorities, as we hear in this report by Robert Parker of Britain's Channel 4.
The first public sign that something was seriously wrong at the bank came in 1990 at Tampa in Florida, when a number of junior BCCI employees were jailed and the bank fined $15 million after admitting the laundering of drug money. But behind this apparently heavy punishment lay a plea bargain deal promising the bank immunity from further investigation, a deal which infuriated the man in charge of...
You see that? You see that? So what they'll do, okay, and you're going to see I'm going to call them the protectors, Mueller, and you'll see the other guy I'm talking about. So you'll have people that work with the deep state, or I'm just calling it the deep state because I don't know what else to call it, okay? The organization. And it's not just the mafia, it's this group of people in the government, rich people, billionaires, intelligence operatives, and organized crime working together to benefit each other, okay? And what they'll do is they'll sacrifice a few lambs. My friend would have been one of these lambs sacrificed because they would have told him, you want to keep your job, you need to sign this paperwork. Sign off on this paperwork on this loan. But it doesn't have this and it doesn't have that. Well, we'll worry about that later. Here, sign off on this loan so we can, this is going to be billions of dollars worth for the company. If you want to keep your job, you better sign off on this thing or go polish off your resume. That's how that shit works. They sacrifice people on the lower end, and the people in the higher end, they get immunity. You see what I'm saying?
Cover operation.
The Customs Service very much wanted indictments not only of low-level BCCI officers, but of some of its higher-level management officers. They also wanted the bank itself indicted. Unfortunately, the Justice Department did not support an indictment of the bank and did not include some of the higher-level officials. That was a great disappointment.
And think about that. The Justice, just like today, the Justice Department is controlled by the president. Who was the president back then? George Bush. What are all the rumors about George Bush? Okay. You notice how all the people below him went to jail, got convicted, and then he pardoned a bunch of them. Okay. And just like with Trump, a lot of people involved with Trump, and you're going to see the same fucking player, an investigator, coming up. They all went to jail, got convicted, went to jail, and Trump pardoned them all. Okay? And so you see the same thing happen. They carry out these things knowing that the boss upstairs is going to protect them. If you own the Justice Department, you have your own people in there, they can sacrifice a few people, lower level people, okay? And then the mid-level guys, they'll get pardons, okay? And then the Justice Department can go back and say, hey, well, we did all we could do. We convicted these people. And one of the problems with breaking systems like that is they only go after people that they can get evidence for to indict. They don't really go after to break up the organization. They target just lower level individuals, and it leaves, just like the mafia organization, you can convict and send to prison as many street soldiers as you want, but if you leave the organization intact at the top, they're just going to hire another bunch of street soldiers. Soldiers can be replaced, okay? That's why they call them replacements. You remember that TV show? I especially remember that movie called Big Red One. And the upper guys who'd been there a while, they would get a new replacement. Well, the replacement's job was always go out first. And they always ended up, the replacements getting shot, they'd have to get a new replacement. It's the same concept, okay? So we'll keep going.
Operations, American Customs had been helped greatly by British Customs, who in October 1988 raided the BCCI headquarters in Leadenhall Street in the heart of the City of London.
The documents that were seized in London were probably the most important to get a sense of what the bank was like and how it operated. The picture that we drew from it was a bank that was involved in enormously questionable transactions all over the world. One which certainly at best could be described as nonchalant about criminal activity within its institution, and at worst could be seen to be specializing in criminal activity.
At the same time as the US customs operation, another investigation was being carried out into BCCI by the US Senate, whose chief investigator was lawyer Jack Bloom. He'd been interviewing a number of BCCI employees, including 2 former senior executives.
In the spring of 1989, I arranged to have 2 witnesses who were both former high executives of the bank come to Miami. And the Customs Service and Internal Revenue Service here wired the hotel room that I was staying in. And I interviewed these bank executives at length. And these former bank executives laid out in detail the capitalization problems, the criminal activity, the fraudulent ownership of First American Bank shares, and the roles of various key individuals in the bank.
At the beginning of 1989, Bloom, in frustration at the lack of official interest, approached Robert Morgenthau, the New York District Attorney.
We started out looking at money laundering. We think the laundering of money was far more extensive than that covered by their plea of guilty.
In Tampa.
In Tampa, we have strong allegations that there was laundering of money through New York in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And then we started to look at ownership and control in violation of American law by BCCI of an American bank. And then it was later on that we started to look at the fraudulent aspects of the bank. And we began to realize that was a serious problem in the fall of 1990. And we shared that information with the Federal Reserve Board as soon as we found that out.
So why is it that the federal authorities and those in Britain appear to have ignored the alarm bells about BCCI for so long? In the States, insiders believe that BCCI's relationship with a whole range of intelligence services, including the CIA, might just be one of the reasons.
The third possibility is that the various governments who had supervisory authority were told by their various intelligence services that various things had been done by the bank for the services and to please be nice to them. In effect, the bank had bought the loyalty or support of various intelligence services by helping them.
In a move led by...
So did you hear that? So the Senate owns investigators said there was a cozy relationship between this international bank and intelligence services, and therefore the Justice Department went easy on them because they were using that bank as an intelligence operation. Now I don't think there was any intelligent operation involved in the Atlanta child murders. I've heard these rumors and bullshit. I think it was more on the lower level of servicing for blackmail and pornography with the Gambinos and Michael Thieves. But we'll keep going.
BCCI was seized on July 5th. Since then, daily revelations about the scandal have begun to rock the world's capitals. In Britain, for example, opposition leader Neil Kinnock accused Prime Minister John Major of negligence, leading to this angry exchange on Monday in the House of Commons.
Oh, I love this part.
Despite what he knew as Chancellor of the Exchequer, he did nothing to warn innocent people of the trap into which they were moving, of a bank that was near bankruptcy, a bank that was giving unsecured loan, a bank that wasn't fit to trade, and he let the bank trade.
I regret very much that the Right Honourable Gentleman continues to conduct opposition by smear over this matter. I have told the Right Honourable Gentleman that the first knowledge I had of that fraud was on the 28th of June. on the 28th of June. On the 28th of June. If the right honourable gentleman is saying I am a liar, he had better.
It's almost exactly, it's almost exactly what's going on with the current Prime Minister of the UK, who appointed this ambassador to the United States, who was good friends with Jeffrey Epstein, and they're like pictures of him with girls and stuff. And then they asked the current Prime Minister, "Did you know that the ambassador was involved with Jeffrey Epstein before you appointed him?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, we had read an intelligence report about that." And they're like, "Well, what the hell did you appoint him if you know that the current ambassador to the United States was an associate with Jeffrey Epstein? If you already knew that, it's not like it's a surprise." You see, so it just keeps repeating itself. And, you got to wonder, why would they appoint someone they knew was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, involved with other girls, underage girls? Again, it's the blackmail. It's blackmail. Okay, they use them to have influence over the government.
Bluntly, if he is not, if he is not, Mr. Speaker, then he had better stop insinuating it.
In this country, the names...
Now, I want to go back here. Hold on one second.
Country, the names of several prominent Americans have been linked to BCCI. Among them, former Defense Secretary Clark Clifford, chairman of First American Bank Shares, the Washington bank owned by BCCI. He is under criminal investigation. Jimmy Carter, whose foundation accepted an $8 million charitable contribution from the bank. And Robert Gates, who allegedly wrote a report 3 years ago on BCCI's illegal activities. Gates is President Bush's nominee to run the CIA. The CIA said...
So you see how that works? So they may not pay you off while you're a government official, but you'll get this golden parachute. Go along with us, approve certain things, vote yes or this or that on certain things, and then you're on this board of the bank. You just show up once a month, vote yay or nay, and then you get $100,000 a year. That's called bribery, folks. That's modern day fucking bribery. Okay?
That Gates was not the...
And then also you saw that there's Gates, Robert Gates, that was Bush's, nominee for the Central Intelligence Agency. He had a relationship with BCCI.
The author of that memo. The agency says it is conducting an internal review to see what links, if any, it has had with BCCI. The newest angle, and potentially the largest bombshell, is bribery.
Yep, you see? Newest angle? No, it's the same angle. It's always been this way.
According to former Senator...
Hold on one second.
Bloom, an ex-BCCI employee, told him the bank brought millions of dollars in bribe money to Washington. Judy?
We turn now to the man who has been looking into the darker side of BCCI's affairs, perhaps as long as anyone in this country. Senator John Kerry, Democrat of Massachusetts. Kerry's subcommittee on terrorism, narcotics, and international operations first came upon the bank's activities as part of an investigation into drug trafficking in 1988. I spoke with Kerry this afternoon. Senator Kerry, thank you for being with us.
So you remember Senator Kerry? You remember him? He ran in 2004 against George Bush. And you remember the allegations coming out about them both being skull and bones members from what was it, Yale or something like that. Now I'm not into conspiracies and crap like that, but I definitely think that you know, Skull and Bones has definitely been linked to the intelligence operations. George Bush Sr. was Skull and Bones. His dad, Prescott Bush, was Skull and Bones. His son, George Bush W. Whatever, make your own up your own intelligence about weapons of mass destruction, was Skull and Bones, and Kerry was Skull and Bones. So if I was conspiracy minded, I would think they had their own gatekeeper inside the Senate investigation into BCCI to steer the investigation away from intelligence operations or whoever they were trying to steer it away from. Totally crazy. Totally crazy. All right, so I'm running out of time here. Hold on one second. I'm going to jump forward and show you another one. And here we are right here. You probably don't recognize that guy because he's got gray hair now. That's Mueller, former FBI Director Mueller. Right here, he's a member of the Justice Department, but eventually he becomes the head of the FBI, and he also investigated Trump on the Russia connections. Remember that? He investigated Trump on the Russia connections, and he basically, sent to jail a bunch of Trump's cohorts who all got pardoned. Remember, and Trump later pardoned them all. And Papadopoulos and Steve Bannon and all those assholes, they're all connected with. Remember, Bannon was a real close associate of Jeffrey Epstein. Remember? So Mueller led the investigation on that. Okay, and then they all got pardoned by Trump. Okay, and now with the Epstein files investigation, Democrats are talking about reappointing Mueller to go after all the people that are listed on the Epstein files. Crazy, huh? It's weird how the same characters keep popping up and up and up and up again. So let me show you something that I found, which is absolutely insane and crazy. Hold on. All right, we're back. So, it's so weird, AI. When you ask it a question on the phone, okay, it comes up with one answer, and then if you ask it like on a computer, it comes up with a different answer. But anyway, what I finally found, it says, in the 1980s, the Bank of Credit and Commerce, BCCI, operated its representative agency in Atlanta on the 20th floor of Tower Place 100, 3340 Peachtree Road. Okay? And let's see. What dates did it operate there? All right. You see? And now it's completely different. I asked it on my phone, and it said April's when it moved in. I guess they did their grand opening on August 1982. Okay? Included Mayor Andrew Young and Jeb Bush. Of course, Jeb Bush, of course. All right? And then it operated until July of 1991 when it was shut down. Their offices, seizure and closure. 5 July 1991. And it's right there. So I was like, wow, Tower Place, that sounds kind of fucking familiar. Okay? And it was on the 20th floor, it said. Okay? And in 1980, it operated from 82 to 91. And in the summer of 1985, I worked in the same fucking building, okay, at USF&G Insurance. Remember all the gay guys that told you about that they would go over and dance at the Limelight over here? Right there, folks. Same fucking place. Very convenient also to guess who? There's Maple Street. There's Ed Garland. There's the Gold Club. Of course, my mom was working right here at Jelco from 80 end of 80 to 1983. There's Linux right over here where I would go to the game room down in the back here and play in the game room and go see movies. We actually went over here to Phipps Plaza. Was it right? Yeah, right here. That's where we saw The Empire Strikes Back. That's when the movie theater was in the back here, and then they moved it upstairs. I guess it's like that. But isn't that fucking convenient? Right across the street from Maurice Gayton's Limelight, where there were, you remember AJ Block? Remember I told you AJ Block and how he had his office, one of his offices at Colony Square. The other one was right here off of Far Court. And they set up, you know, Lansdowne of Georgia, Lansdowne of Texas, Lansdowne of California. And they're all real estate investment companies, remember? And remember all the Maple Street fucking companies that Garland set up for investment and money laundering? And then guess what? They're right across, you don't want to haul that money around. You're just right across the street from where the bank's going to be that you need, right? Makes it all really fucking convenient. And then on my next video, I'm going to go over how there are other attorneys that are associated or were associated with Garland, Thieves, and the mob in that building at the same time. Now, I don't remember BCCI, but I did go to the 20th floor. I do remember going to the 20th floor because we were on the 10th floor, okay? And sometimes when people would type on those old IBM Select typewriters, the ones would look like twos. And sometimes we would get mail. I guess it was from BCCI from the 20th floor. And I would have to go up there and drop it off. Remember the fat girl I told you that it started getting enthralled with me and let me drive her car home because she wasn't feeling well, supposedly? She was up on the 20th floor. Was she working for BCCI? I don't know. I don't remember BCCI. Okay. But who knows? It's just an insanely small, tiny fucking world all right here, literally within blocks of each other. You've got Gayton in the Limelight and all the Lansdowne investment companies. You've got Garland, his Thieves' girlfriend. You got Wayne Williams dropping off kids at the Shadow Lawn Theater, the studio. You got the Gold Club right there, owned by the Gambinos with Coppola and Hirsch Friedman. It's an insanely tiny fucking criminal world, folks. All right. We'll keep going. All right. See you.